Hello, welcome to the show. Today, there's some very interesting news from a televised speech which President Putin of Russia gave. In this speech, he stated a reminder to Poland that the western states of Ukraine were a gift from Stalin to Poland. Now, what President Putin is referring to here is the ceding of some territory of the Soviet Union in around 1945, when Joseph Stalin was requested to allow some land that was in the Soviet Union to be returned to Polish control, which he did. Now, there's a little bit of background here. In 1939, Poland had much larger borders on the east than it does today. But then there was, in 1939, the September campaign, where both Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union invaded Poland and effectively split Poland up, ownership of Poland. The area in the east, which the Soviet Union claimed after the 1943-44 liberation by the Soviet Union, liberation from the Nazi Germans who were occupying the western areas of Poland. An agreement, the Tehran and Yalta conferences were held, and an agreement was made by the Allied forces that the area taken by the Soviet Union in 1939 would remain as Soviet territory. Now, that territory is now mostly become either Belarus or Ukraine, and some of it in Lithuania. Poland lost a large amount of land from 1939 to 1947. They lost about 74,000 square kilometres. There is a 200-kilometre wide strip on the east of what was Poland, running up and down the whole length of Poland, that was lost to the Soviet Union. So President Putin is referring to, in that period in 1944-45, when there was a request to Stalin to allow some of the Soviet lands to be returned to Poland, and that was agreed to. Now, things are heating up in the north of Ukraine, in the area around Belarus, Lithuania, Poland, the borders in those areas. There are things like the Wagner forces have been moved up into Belarus. They have been seen this week in the training videos released on social media, where those Wagner forces are training Belarusian forces. They were running campaigns that seemed to, like, basically open days, to entice young men who might be interested in fighting for Belarus to come and join and be trained by the Wagner forces. Obviously, the Wagner forces are someone that, if you were looking to join this conflict, would be someone that you might want to learn under, given their extensive frontline experience over the course of this conflict. So the region, Belarus, is certainly heating up. There is also talk that perhaps the Wagner forces are in Belarus not just for training, but they may be there to secure the Suwalki Gap, or the Suwalki Corridor, which is this short corridor of land running along the Lithuanian and Polish borders. It's a 65-kilometre long strip of land which connects the most western part of Belarus with the most eastern part of Kaliningrad. Now, Kaliningrad is that oblast of Russia which is separated from Russia, which happened after the 1991 collapse of the Soviet Union, when new independent states of Lithuania and Poland formed themselves, and then that was cut off from the Soviet Union. But still, it's a predominantly ethnically Russian-speaking oblast or enclave, gives access to the Baltic port for Russia. So, in this interview that Putin gave, he also went on to state that any attack on Belarus is an attack on Russia, and that the the Russians would react with all means at their disposal. So Putin has officially now stated that any attack by Poland or Lithuania or NATO forces in Belarus will be considered an attack on Russia. Putin went on to mention that there are reports of Lithuanian and Polish troops forming a coalition and moving those troops into the western regions of Ukraine in this area that was previously Polish territory prior to like 1939. This is not considered to be mercenaries. As I've mentioned before, there are already large numbers of Polish mercenaries known to be fighting in Ukraine on the Ukrainian side of the conflict. The talk here is that they would form operational troops which would be actually under the Polish and Lithuanian national banners, that these forces would join the conflict. Perhaps not as NATO as so much, but as just national state players of Poland and Lithuania. So the Warsaw Security Committee this week has announced that it is making the decision to move military troops to the eastern border with Belarus. This, they have said, is in reaction to the Wagner forces being located in Belarus. Now, the Yevgeny Prigozhin, one of the most interesting, colourful characters of this conflict, he has been on television speaking about this. He was shown in a video welcoming his fighters to Belarus, telling them, though, that they would take no further part in the Ukrainian war, that they were just here to train Belarusian fighters before they head off to Africa. Who knows? I think anything that Yevgeny Prigozhin says, we need to consider through the lens of him playing many games with the media, utilising the media as a tool. And I still think that many of us, myself included, don't know the real reasons behind some of that. Many people, including myself, are still intrigued by the fact that after an attempted coup, Yevgeny is walking around still in control of his Belarusian fighters to some extent, reportedly traveling freely between Moscow, Minsk, St. Petersburg, where have you. So definitely this story isn't over. And if Yevgeny is saying that the Belarusian fighters will not be playing any part in the war in Ukraine going forward, then some might suggest that they will. I don't know. It's up to you to make your own mind on that one. This is all on the background of what we're seeing as escalation in the north of Ukraine. While the bulk of the fighting thus far has been in the southern regions and central regions of Ukraine, since May, but certainly in the last 2 weeks, picking up a lot in intensity, have been bombing and missile attacks on the areas of Sumy and Chernihiv. They are to the northeast and east of Kiev, so quite high up. Sumy is across the Russian border from the Belgorod region, and Chernihiv is up near the Belarusian border. Even this week, the Deputy Defense Minister of Ukraine, she announced that the Ukrainians have intelligence indicating that the Russians are amassing a force of 100,000 soldiers in this area to the east of Kharkiv and north of Kharkiv, that those forces will contain 900 tanks and 370, I think it was multiple launch rocket systems, plus all of the accompanying armoured personnel carriers and infantry fighting vehicles that would go along with that. Now, the Russians haven't come out and confirmed this. Then again, why would they? And they're not generally the type to go and announce when they are amassing, preparing for an offensive, unlike what we've had from Ukraine, where we had plenty of warning of the starting of the offensive, the Ukrainian one. Our expectations here, though, are that there is some troops being amassed in these areas. We have reports from the Russian Minister of Defense, Sergei Shoigu, that he has been seeing upwards of 10,000 volunteers joining each week. This came after questions to President Putin a month or so ago, with a bunch of frontline war correspondents, and they were asking him about a mobilisation. Would Russia be doing a second mobilisation? And his comment at that time was that there was no need, and that they would in the future if they needed to. Then Shoigu's comment seemed to give some colour to that, indicating that Russia is perhaps performing a silent mobilisation at the moment, if they are recruiting 10 to 13,000 a week purely through volunteers. Now, Russia has large reserve forces, so it's possible that some of these volunteers are reservists, or some of them may now be previous soldiers whose contracts had completed and are coming back to the fighting now, perhaps deciding that after the first 3 months, where it didn't look particularly good for Russia, maybe things are looking better now, so they're coming back to claim some of the salary they can make doing this. Look, I don't know, I'm not on the ground, but there's certainly talk that these numbers of 100,000 troops amassing in the north may not be the exact figure, but that Russia does appear to be strengthening its capabilities in this area. We are seeing up in the area, up in Kupiansk and up in northern regions, that there are pushes being made, that there's heavy fighting, and that Russia is making some small advances in these areas. So going back to Putin's speech, his speech, that a reminder to the Poles that the western areas of Ukraine were a gift from Stalin. I think underneath this, if we're reading between the lines here, I think what Putin is actually saying here is that he's talking not to the Poles, but he's talking to Kiev. He's speaking to the Ukrainians. So clearly, if Poland and Lithuania are talking about putting forces together under their national banners, under their flags of Poland and Lithuania, and moving them into the western states of Ukraine, then this is something which Ukraine and Kiev must agree to. Now, I think that what Putin is hinting at here is that Ukraine should be wary of doing this. Now, this is political play, of course, but I think what Putin is hinting at is that Russia doesn't want all of Ukraine. Russia, and this has been commented on by people far smarter than I am and more experienced in this field than I am, people like John Mearsheimer, who have suggested that perhaps what Russia will ultimately do here is drive west to the Dnieper River, take Odessa, link Transnistria, which is on the eastern edge of Moldova and on the western side of Odessa, link all of that, landlock Ukraine, and that's as far as Russia would want to go. Many people have commented that Russia don't want to take over all of Ukraine. In the state that it's in, it would quite possibly be a liability, particularly the western states for Russia. They're not interested in it. But that leaves the western states bordering Poland and Lithuania, and if Ukraine reaches a point in the next 6 months or so. Remember, there's been reports indicated that Biden has said to Zelensky that he has until December to show progress, otherwise the funding from the West will drop. Now, it's the funding from the West which is keeping Ukraine in this fight at this stage. Without military weapons, training, aid, financial aid, support, intelligence, Ukraine would not be able to continue this fight. So, if perhaps we get to October, November, December, and Ukraine is in such a weakened state, but they have agreed to allow these Polish and Lithuanian forces into the western areas of Ukraine, I think what Putin is hinting at to Kiev is that those forces may not leave, and that if Ukraine finds itself in a weakened enough state, it may now find that it has two occupying forces, Russia in the east and Polish forces in the west. Now, of course, Poland is denying this, that they're saying that's not their goal at all, which of course they would deny, and it may not be their goal at all. I don't know. I'm not connected to the Polish CM. I don't know what's going on there or the military command there. However, there is a strong history and dislike between Poland and Russia due to what happened in 1939 and that large capture of land that went to the Soviet Union and became Belarus and became Ukraine. So there certainly will be some people in Poland, nationalists in Poland, who would like to see some of that territory reclaimed. And I think if you try to look at it objectively, it becomes perhaps a win-win situation for Poland in some respects. Poland can offer to Ukraine, we will come in with our forces and we'll help you in this fight. Now, if Ukraine wins, Poland looks great. They've helped win the fight. If Ukraine loses, then Poland perhaps gets to claim those western states of Ukraine without a fight from Russia, because Russia has effectively, I feel, stated that they don't want the west of Ukraine. I could be wrong on this. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If you've watched this far, thank you very much. Please subscribe. I'll try to get another one of these out tomorrow as we get more information coming in about what seems to be growing to becoming a larger conflict in the north. Thank you.